Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the History of Fan Anime. I'm your host, William Chow, and today's episode, we get one of these good show and tell with a little bit of history episode. And in today's episode, what am I going to show you? I'm going to show you this device, okay? This is what they refer to as our game doctor, and of course, this particular one is called the Super Wildcard. And this one was probably the most complex hacked material device ever created for video games. And so in this episode, I'm going to go over this really quickly. I'm going to also make a separate episode for this to put onto the Patreon PayPal page, which is sort of more detailed in exactly where and the source of this stuff I got to, because I can't cover certain topics of it here on the channel. All right, so. Before again, I want you to remind people to go down below, click like, and click subscribe. This one is going to be very important on this episode because obviously, we're talking very sensitive material, and I'm sure YouTube, doesn't want to, broadcast this too far out and too much about it. So again, anything that you do with the like, will definitely help if you want to support me financially. And again, you want to get access to the bonus episode that comes along with this particular episode. You want to get onto the PayPal or the Patreon. All the subscribers there will basically get access to all the other stuff, the other episodes that I can't talk about here on YouTube. Show you stuff that I can't show you here on YouTube and whatnot. Again, link is below. You can have a look at the various different episodes and the various topics that I have there. You can see for yourself. And do help me on that particular. Again, you can also see the episode. I'm going to make these sort of the full-length episodes, shall we say, down below. All right. I also want to mention that I've also updated the database for the History of Fan Anime, because I know that the YouTube algorithm and the YouTube search engine isn't all that good when you want to look for certain topics of particular things. I did do an episode about the sort of history of video game piracy and that kind of stuff and whatnot. And again, if you try to type that in, you may not find it. But again, so I've designed a database on an Excel spreadsheet, which basically has all the episodes, all numbered, and also all the links available with description, with more detailed descriptions about what's actually in the episodes on this thing. Again, link is below. Do have a look at it, and you can then see more episodes about video games, and again things about this particular topic. Okay, and again, just have a look at that, and you'll find it quite a useful resource. All right. So today's again we're going to get into this particular device. Now, I mentioned this earlier in a different episode, and basically this is probably I'm sort of thinking about all the different game consoles and that kind of stuff. Starting from Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo and whatnot. This is for the Super Nintendo. Okay, you can just see about the cartridge fitting on the bottom of it here. PlayStations and Saturns, Dreamcasts, and that kind of stuff are all were all mostly chip designs and bypasses and that kind of stuff. But this is probably the most complex piece of technology that ever came out in sort of video game history. And I'm going to just sort of go over all the different things that this thing can do, and then then I'll have a more special episode again to cover the topics that I can't normally cover in fuller detail over in this one. Okay, so without further delay, let's go to the close-up and just sort of show you what I have using the top view camera. All right. So I'll start from the beginning and go over a little bit of history here. So I'll bring out two normal cartridges. Here I have the Japanese version of Street Fighter 2 Turbo, and the US version of the game ActRaiser, right? And again, most people are very common, are familiar with it. These are just standard Super Nintendo cartridges, okay? And what the problem what sort of happens is that when you release software at this particular time, because they made these cartridges, for their particular country. So, for example, a Japanese cartridge over here would only work in Japanese system, and this cartridge over here would only work on the US systems, right? Now, at first, okay, the really only difference between these two cartridges is, well, when sticking them into a Super Nintendo, is that if you look at the cartridges really carefully upright, okay, um, the cartridges, they look like they'll insert much the same way. Like they'll both have the same sort of card slot here, which allows the cartridges to fit most the same. The only difference is on the US cartridge, they've got these little slots cut into them right here. Okay, and those will then, if you don't have a US Super Nintendo, it will force and not allow you to stick the Japanese cartridge in, because the Japanese cartridge doesn't have these little slots in it. So therefore, when you go to stick your cartridges into your standard Super Nintendo, it wouldn't work. So, for example, if we take your standard Super Nintendo here, okay, and you'd normally stick your cartridges in there, and it fits usually fine, right? But when you go to stick a Japanese one in here, right, it doesn't go in all the way because of the fact that it gets stopped. Now, one of the ways you would fix that is, of course, you'd open up the Super Nintendo here, and right here and right here, you could take like a needle nose plier and nippy cutters or something like that, and basically break off those two tabs right here and here in order to to get around that problem. So that way, when you break the tabs off, the cartridge can go all the way thin, right? And then you'd be able to start. You could actually then play Japanese cartridges on the Super Nintendo. Okay, now that basically is one of the problems that was recently solved by basically having the ability to play Japanese games on a US style Super Nintendo. Now, that was one problem. Now the other problem was that, well, these games for the Japanese games and that kind of stuff, they usually came out before the American versions came out, because they're usually a little bit faster. But there's a lot of games that came out in Japanese that never came out in English. For example, one of my favorite games is Langreaser. That came out for the Super Nintendo, and Langreaser 2, which was more importantly, which was the sequel, never came out in the US, and only ever came out on the Sega Genesis and on the Super Nintendo. So how in the heck am I supposed to get those ones? Okay, so I, like many other people, out there, especially in I guess other countries like Hong Kong and Taiwan, also ran into this dilemma. So they decided, hey, we're gonna figure out a way to to get around this and try to figure out how to solve this software issue, right? The crafty guys in Hong Kong and Taiwan, they came out and invented this device here. Okay, this is called the original was called the Game Doctor. Okay, and you can see it has a whole bunch of different things on it, and I'll sort of go over it. So the first thing is on one side, it essentially has the same as a Japanese cartridge slot. Okay, so if you kind of look at the configuration of the cartridges, and that, because it sort of has the configuration of a Japanese cartridge slot. Okay, so it has the main slots already sort of laid out there for you there. Okay, so it can handle the standard thing there. Okay. Also, like the US cartridge, you can see that it also has the notch already cut in the right spot, so that these cartridges will line up with these holes both right here and right here, so they'll fit into that. So basically, it's designed to work with both the US and the Japanese Super Nintendo systems, right? So that's the card that's plugged in, and that's basically designed it so that it just snaps right on top of a Super Nintendo like this, right? And basically allows you to operate this machine with the help of that. Also, you may also notice that that this device is totally independent of its of a power source. Okay, there's no additional power supplies on this. Some models do have it, but this particular one does not. Okay, it entirely runs on the power of the bus that's in here, or i.e. off the Super Nintendo. So it just kind of gives you, this edition is very modern. Okay, so when you click it like that, it now behaves the same way a cartridge would behave. Okay, now, so that's the first feature that it does. The second sort of thing that you notice is there's also this card slot right here. This is identical to the card slot that's already in the Super Nintendo. So this allows you to take a standard game and plug it right on top like that. Okay, so now this cartridge of ActRaiser basically goes through this game doctor before it actually ends up on there. Okay, so and you can also likewise put a Japanese game like this and slot that in the top as well. So then it is all capable of reading both Japanese and US games. One of the functions of this particular device is now that you've got this cartridge plugged into the top of this thing, you can then take the contents of the cartridge and load it into the internal memory of the doctor. And then from there, you can then save all the contents onto these floppy, if you have floppy diskettes. And this thing is equipped with a floppy disk drive on the side, so you can then put a floppy disk into the floppy disk drive, like so, and then put all the information that's on this cartridge here to the floppy disk. Okay, so what is the purpose of that? Obviously, well, let's say that in this case, you can start the thing up, right? Without a cartridge in here now, you can use your floppy diskettes here to then, put in and reload the memory with whatever particular contents that you had before. In this case, it would be Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Okay, so now you no longer need to have this thing. Okay, you can now operate this and play that game entirely off of this disc. Okay, and so basically now you can now they managed to solve the problem of trying to get software that's in a different country, different zone, stuff that's not designed for this particular system. It now can solve this problem. So this particular thing I have here is a version of Sonic Blastman 2, okay, on this particular disc, and you can then push it just in there, and you can then load and play that particular game off of that. Okay. Okay, that is probably why you with such a device like this, you were able to have all such access to all the Super Nintendo games, both for Japanese systems and for U.S. systems, so available on these things like emulators and emus and that kind of stuff that are out there. Okay, that's why we have so many of these ROM images available. Okay. The other way that you could also use this thing is as shown here. You have the access to the floppy disk drive, which is just a standard, IBM formatted 3.5-inch floppy disk drive, which just loads and runs pretty much like every other floppy disk drive would, right? Okay, that's one way you could do it. The other way, of course, is on the very back of this unit has a standard parallel port. Okay, again, so if you wanted to try to hook this up to the computer, okay, the fastest way that you could transfer stuff, electronically on these old computers was by the parallel port, i.e. the printer port. Okay, serial is slower, right? So because I think you can only get most people only got 2400 baud or maybe 9600 baud at most using the serial port. So the parallel port was faster. So that you can then, if you had all the information, instead of using these clunky floppy diskettes, you could then actually hook up the computer and then load in the data using, this cartridge port here. So that's one of the options that it has available on that, right? So, this particular version, as you can see, is made in Taiwan. It's called the Super Wildcard SMS 3201. Okay. and it's it's called the standard 3.5-inch Magic Disk Drive. Okay, again, all made in Taiwan, and it's a great sort of thing. So I just wanted to make a video to basically talk about and document that such a device was made historically. It's probably one of the most advanced technical devices designed for this purpose for any console. I'm thinking Nintendo. I'm thinking the original Nintendo. I'm thinking Sega Master System, Sega Genesis. Obviously Super Nintendo. This is probably the most advanced thing for those type of things. I know they made cartridge-based things like the Action Replay and that kind of stuff, which is more cartridge-based items. Everything that they made for like essentially the PlayStation, the Dreamcast, Saturn, GameCube were all essentially chips and bypass chips and that kind of stuff. So in terms of an actual piece of hardware with this much integration, literally I think it has to be given to this device for the Super Nintendo. Anyway, that's all I wanted to cover on this particular episode. For the YouTube watchers and whatnot. Again, I'm gonna go and do a more extended episode and talk about some of the other stuff that I got in the same box as this thing, and get into some of the other things that were also available here. An example, okay, to bring those out of archive as well. Okay, so again, you want to make sure you go down below, click those links, and check that video out. All right, so I hope you found that kind of interesting. Again, this is one of these eras and things that are quite different in the the history of how video games and that kind of stuff. There was this intense sort of need for and desire for video games to be brought into markets which maybe the major companies weren't expecting them to be in those markets, and you give it to the guys in Hong Kong / Taiwan to reverse engineer and figure out this sort of device and actually build something like this in this sort of complexity for the market. Again, this for a lot of people this wasn't cheap, this technology. It's almost as much as a computer or maybe like a whole new emulator EMU system as it is now, but definitely it is something that's a marvel of the ingenuity and if there's a will, there's a way, right? Much the same way how we treat fan subbing and getting anime out to the masses, right? All right, so there'll be obviously and so I will be getting into more topics of that kind of in the future. All right, so until next time, I will see you again.